Okay, thanks everyone for joining us today on KRTD News. We got some interesting stories for you guys today. Let's go on to our first story. One moment. I'm having an
So, Shane, we got an excellent start to this morning. One of the things that we want to bring up again here is the Palestine-Israel conflict. The map that you're being presented right now is the original borders as they were represented back in 1946 through to the current time. And basically how the agreements during...
I hate to interrupt, but our nameplates, that's it. Our nameplates are wrong.
Oh, why? How are they? All right. Well,
I was trying to figure out what the glitch was. I knew there was one.
So, in the meantime, while we're looking at the map, getting ready for Reefs in the process of correcting some of the minor technical issues, Shane, this was your big issue. Where are we with the current status of the Palestine-Israel conflict?
So we start here in 1946 when it was all Palestine. And then we get into after the aftermath of the Holocaust, and a lot of the Jews start going to that area, and they apply at the UN for a state. And the UN says, okay, we're going to cut Palestine in half. Now, this is without consulting the Palestinians. This is a decision the UN arbitrarily makes, and they cut Palestine in half. So now you have Israel, which is a state, and you have Palestine, which does not have state status and does not have a UN seat, the same as Israel does. Then you go into 1967. There was a little bit of a war between Israel and Palestine, which did happen. And then you get this. There is no more Palestine, really. You have the West Bank and you have Gaza, and that's the only real land that's left over for them. I believe there was another conflict after that. Let's go into now. So now, just so everybody knows, the green is where Palestine is now, what's left of the Palestinian lands and territories, and the yellow is Israel. So look at the decrease of green from 1946 all the way up to 2021. It's a significant decrease. And then the Palestinians really don't have any land left. Then you'll hear one side say, "Oh, I can't make a deal." The other side say, "I can't make a deal." But if you act, and the Israel will say, "Well, we can't negotiate with Hamas." If you actually look at Hamas's charter, within their own charter, they will accept a deal going back to the 1967 borders. And Israel pretends that's not in the charter of Hamas, but it actually is. So even the more extreme Palestinians are like, we'll take a deal. Now, there are strong beliefs on both sides, on the Israeli and Palestinian side. The Israelis want all the land, then they want to keep it the way it is. The Palestinians want to return to the green. Now, this is a very difficult problem. This is not something that has a simple solution. And a lot of people say, hey, let them fight it out. Israel has Iron Dome, which deters 90% of the rockets the Palestinians have. They have a massive army. They're backed by the U.S. They get 100 times as much money as the Palestinians get from the U.S. every year. They get, I believe it's $4 billion, while the Palestinians get $36 million. So if you compare the difference here, if we let them fight it out, Israel could literally just nuke Palestine and destroy what's left of it. So it's a really tough issue. And personally, I don't enjoy when the U.S. gets involved in other affairs. I think the UN, I think this has to be a UN issue, not a US issue, because I don't think the US should directly interfere by itself. If we want to supply mediators, I was going to say moderators. I think that's a little bit of a different issue, but I think that anything militarily, I don't think the US should do, because it would be wrong for us to back either side militarily. Now, Joe, do you have anything to say before we go on to our video?
This really is a key issue, and it goes back to basically how arbitrary Europe was following World War I. And World War II, as 1946 was specific. We did an awful lot of line drawing without consulting with the actual stakeholders that are involved in where the lines were drawn. You know, we have the Kurds right now that are divided up into 4 different countries: Turkey, Iraq, Syria, and Afghanistan. You know, so we have basically a long history of where we've redefined lines arbitrarily, directly impacting and affecting the people that, you know, we drew the lines around. So this is nothing new, and this isn't the first or the last conflict that we're going to have to go in and basically take care of issues that were created, 46, that's 70 years ago now, 75 years ago. You know, so we have a long history of this that we have to go back 75 years of arbitrary lines. But yeah, absolutely. Let's go on to the next clip here, Shane.
Absolutely. So this is a video from Kyle Kalinske. This is from 6 years ago. Now, his views on it are a little different now, but this was an interesting idea, I think, that he had. And I just want to point out, the key to a compromise is that nobody's happy. Or nobody's entirely happy. So I think this is somewhat of a fair compromise. Now, nothing's going to be 100% fair, but let's take a look at what Kyle Kalinske has to say.
Becomes, what's the solution, or how can you get as close to a solution as possible? And here's the answer. First of all, both the extremists on both sides are going to have to realize you're never going to get what you want. Let's face it, extremists on the Palestinian side, they've said, well, we don't want Israel to exist, and we want it, what's it called, right to return, is it? Or we just get all the land back and Israel stops existing. That's never going to happen. It's never going to happen. By the same token, somebody who's a Cherokee or an Algonquin in the U.S. could say, we're tired of, these savage white people who have this land that they call the United States of America. We want it back. Never going to happen. Never going to happen. Yeah, we were fucked up to do it, but we can never just give back all the land. It's just not practical at this point. Israel can't just stop existing. The United States can't just stop existing. So what do? Well, you have to be reasonable, and you have to come to some sort of a compromise. So you have to, number one, allow the Palestinians to have a state, okay? Benjamin Netanyahu and the U.S. government blocked non-member UN recognition for Palestine recently. Those were the only two that were against it, the U.S. and Israel. Everybody else in the world said, yeah, give them a state. What the fuck's the problem? But Israel and the U.S. said, no! Unbelievable! It's so crazy. Don't do that. Well, what do you want? And you wonder why there's violence. You're not even allowing them to have statehood. And you're fucking blockading the region, so it's hard for them to get food and water and just stuff that anybody else would need. They're under occupation. So, number one, they need to have full UN recognition and statehood status. Israel already has that, and they're going to keep that, okay? But then number two, it becomes, where do you draw the borders? Well, I would say you don't draw it at the 1967 borders, which is what a lot of reasonable Israelis want to do. Because honestly, I still think that's too harsh on the Palestinians. I think you need to go all the way back to the 1947 borders, which is what the original partition plan is. If you look at a map of the original 1947 borders, well, what is that? That's essentially 50-50. So what you need to do, this is the solution to the fighting. You need a 50-50 two-state solution, the 1947 borders, and here's what you do. You take the borders and you put a massive UN buffer zone, okay, which essentially is this idea that good fences make good neighbors, and these are the mediators who are going to be there to stop any fighting that may break out. Now, oftentimes people will say, people who are extremists on the Israeli side and extremists on the Palestinian side, they're both going to shriek and yell and bitch about this and say, that's unfair, but that's how you know it's a reasonable solution. The extremists on both sides don't like it, which means what? Rational, moderate minds need to prevail and need to come to this conclusion and say it's okay. Israel, I'm sorry, their extremists want to, eliminate all the Palestinians. Don't take my word for it. Ayelet Shaked, who's an Israeli politician, she wrote a message on Facebook, it got a bunch of likes too, that said, we're fighting all the Palestinian people. They are all the enemy. Wipe them out. A call for genocide. There was another article we covered yesterday. It was in the Wall Street Journal. They argued Palestinian civilians aren't civilians. So get rid of them, right? Well, that's also, the Israeli extremists want to see Palestinians eliminated. The Palestinian extremists want to see Israelis eliminated. Well, I'm discounting both of you automatically. You're both fucking idiots, okay? We're never going to get a solution with you guys. So the answer is 50-50 two-state solution, full UN recognition and status, okay? You put a big UN buffer zone in the middle. And finally, Here's the fair criticism of my solution. Well, Kyle, there's still going to be violence, and there's still going to be, attacking. And guess what? That's right. That's 100% right. But by the same token, you're never going to eliminate all murder. Murder is a crime, right? You're never going to eliminate all murder. You're never going to eliminate all robbery. You're never going to eliminate all burglary. You're never going to eliminate all of any kind of particular crime, okay? But that doesn't mean you shouldn't come up with the best idea to try to limit it as much as possible. And a 50-50 two-state solution, both becoming members of the UN, that is the best solution possible. It's doing as right a thing as you could possibly do, and it will certainly limit the violence tremendously. And the final thing I'll say is this. There are some people who mean very well. I've gotten this position explained to me from 4 different people now, okay? They say, no, Kyle, you got it all wrong. We don't need a 50-50 two-state solution. What we need is a one-state solution. And honestly, I think this approach is the uber-liberal approach of like, hey, man, why can't we all just get along and hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and there'll be rainbows and puppies, and we can't come together by going further apart and not being under one state. I honestly think that view is silly. Now, again, I think these people mean well because they want a solution. They just want a one-state solution where, you treat everybody equally. The problem is, it's not just deep, deep cultural differences between the Israelis and the Palestinians. It's also deep, deep fundamentalist religious differences between the two. So when you have deep cultural disagreements and deep religious disagreements, it's not something that, is just you can just get over and you'll be willing to accept the other as legitimate given enough fucking tea parties where you eat crumpets or have enough picnics together. It's not going to happen. Maybe by the year 3612, we will have gotten over the idea of religion and we will have gotten over our ridiculous differences about skin tone and cultures and this and that. But that's not the world we live in right now. And while it's certainly not the case that it's always true that good fences equal good neighbors, sometimes good fences equal good neighbors. Even moderate Israelis don't like Palestinians, and moderate Palestinians don't like Israelis. And you would have wars over just what to name the one state. Once I would say, we're naming it Israel. The others I would say, no, we're naming it Palestine. Then they would do Palest Israel or Israelistine, or they would try to, but they wouldn't agree on anything, man. They wouldn't agree on what fucking color the sky is. So one state is not a legitimate solution. I think 2 is the way to go. You're never going to eliminate the violence, but you cut it drastically if you do a 50-50 two-state solution. Go back to the 1947 borders. And when people say, hey, that's not practical, what are you going to do with all the areas that Israel has taken over and they're settling? Here's what you do. Get the fuck out of there. You shouldn't be there in the first place. You shouldn't have expanded. You shouldn't have done settlements. You shouldn't have pushed past the 1947 borders to begin with. You were wrong to do that. So now, oh gosh, it's so hard for us to take 3 weeks and move away from that. That's too fucking bad. Move away from that, go to the 1947 borders. There's your solution. Now, it's a guarantee that nobody is going to listen to this. Nobody gives a shit. Nobody wants to make these hard decisions and hard choices. But this is the best thing you could do, and it's definitely not going to happen, which is so pathetic and so sad.
Okay, let's go back to the map while we talk about this, just so we can have a visual.
It becomes what's...
Okay.
We're getting there. Awesome.
So, Joe, why don't you go first and give your reaction to? I think he has a really interesting idea. I don't know if it's the best idea. There've been so many, but it's an idea.
Well, and that's it. There's an idea. And we've gone to the table on this several times. Netanyahu, even back with the original, 1971, post-1947 plan, the USS Liberty, when it was attacked for the 7-Day War, where Israel actually went up against Egypt, Syria, and like 2 other countries, in like the same week, trying to establish their security against what was going on. But this is one of those things where Israel has literally become everything they were created to be against. So where we are with the plan, I think one of the things you brought up earlier, Shane, was real important. The U.S. needs to completely back out of this. We need to get completely out of Israel. We need to get completely out of Palestine. Reason why is because we are too close to this. We were involved in its creation. We were involved in support of the 7-Day War, despite some things that led up to it. We are simply too close to the issue on both the Palestine front as well as the Israeli front. We have a large Jewish population here. We have a lot of Palestinian expats living here in the U.S. They're now U.S. citizens, but they still have family in Palestine. We are just too close. We definitely need to get out and let somebody else take a look at doing the moderation and establishing what should be the status quo that is maintained until we can come to a reasonable solution further on down the road.
Definitely. I think that this is something where now it sounds really bad, but I do think this becomes a UN issue and not a US issue itself, because this does affect all the nations, but maybe the US doesn't take the lead on this one. Maybe England takes the lead on this one. Maybe somebody else. It's just an example. I'm not necessarily saying it, but maybe another country takes the lead on it. Someone who is not as close and doesn't have as much invested into it takes the lead. A different UN state maybe takes the lead and provides some moderators. It doesn't have to be the US. It could be any other country who says, we're going to send moderators and we're going to help with the negotiations. It shouldn't be us, because we are definitely too close to it. And the other thing is, we have a bias. The US absolutely has a bias toward Israel. So any deal the US would help moderate, that definitely a Biden administration would help moderate, due to how the neoliberals are on this issue. They're going to moderate a deal that heavily favors Israel if we moderate any deal.
Oh, yeah. So if we go back and we send it to the UN, now the Palestine-Israel issue is very much a UN Security Council issue,
right?
Which, of course, the US is a sitting member of. But along with that, the other sitting members also include China and Russia as well. And one of the things that could be done is actually go in with a multi-nation moderation party. U.S., of course, would back out due to conflict of interest. This would allow the other nations, such as Russia, who at one time, an awful lot of the current Israeli citizens are actually descendant of former Soviet Russia citizens that moved there following World War II. Same with most of the Eastern Bloc countries as well. So there is a connection there as well. But if we can get members from the UN Security Council nations to be part of the moderation, Russia, China, I'm not sure who actually has the alternative seat right now. But that may be one of those things that we can actually look at, is do the whole global perspective, because as you did mention, the Israel-Palestine conflict right now is a global issue. It's no longer just US, Israel, Palestine. It has become international. It is affecting operation, throughout the world. So I think you got a good point.
And I think it has to definitely be a deal. It's moderate. So it's France. I think it's France who's currently on the UN Security Council. So there are 15 countries on the UN Security Council right now. Okay.
Yes.
So that's
the UN Security Council has 15 countries on it. Most of them are fixed. There happen to be 5 qualified veto votes. So there are 5 nations that can literally take anything that the UN Security Council suggests and say, nah, that's not going to happen. And the US has actually used that veto vote on several occasions. Russia has less so. See, the 5 permanent members of the UN Security Council, which is, they call them the P5, the permanent 5. So I love looking up this information on the fly.
We
France,
should have.
right? France
Yeah,
is
France.
actually one of the permanent members. So China, France, the Russian Federation, United Kingdoms of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and the United States of America. Okay, the other 10 non-permanent, 5 of which are elected each year by the General Assembly for a 2-year term. And they're actually sectioned off into quadrants. So 5 from African and Asian states, 1 from Eastern Europe, 2 from Latin America, 2 from Western Europe.
So great.
So the African and Asian states, especially if you look at Afghanistan and Iraq as the Middle East or Southwest Asia, they have a vested interest in making sure that the Palestine-Israel conflict is stabilized.
Oh, definitely.
Uh,
They live right there. They care a lot about
oh,
that.
yeah. Some of the other considerations, especially because of the longstanding conflict between Israel and Iran, you're looking at other countries that are very deeply affected by what goes on. Georgia, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, all of those, northern neighbors to Iran. And the Israeli rhetoric often calls on for, war with Iran in order to overturn the current regime in Iran. So if we can stabilize that, if we can get the pretense of Iranian influence out of the Palestinian-Israel conflict, that settles things down for a lot of those nations in vicinity of Iran, including Iraq and Afghanistan, Pakistan, Uzbekistan. All of these countries would definitely feel a lot more comfortable with the entire region stabilized.
Absolutely. I definitely think this, you take the UN Security Council, you hammer out a deal that's fair, and a deal that's fair, I don't think is now. I don't think that the current state is a fair deal.
No, it
Um,
definitely is not.
Now, I think it's very likely if you have cool, collected, reasonable moderators, you may go back to the 1947 borders, which is picture 2 here. You may go back to that. You may have
Correct.
something between 1940. That's very likely what you'll end up with. Maybe something between 67 and 47, but likely, if you have reasonable people who are not biased, you'll get back to the 1947 borders.
And even the 1967, if they were to respect those, I believe that was just before the 7-Day War.
Mhm.
Yeah. Even that, and I hate to say this because of the amount of depopulation associated with the Palestinian people that has occurred in the intervening years, full return of the West Bank would be more than adequate for the population that's available. We have the resources is global right now to go in and actually rebuild those communities, give them some place to live, remove the rubble, take care of the war damage that's been developed over the past 40 years now, and actually rebuild, communities. I hate to go with a segregated community idea here, but apparently it's very obvious that at least something along those lines needs to happen. But we need to be able to set up the Palestinian people with the full capability of being self-sustaining, independent of Israel, until Israel and Palestine can come to some sort of agreement.
Absolutely. And the other thing we have to do is make sure the US doesn't put in a puppet leader while we're in the middle of doing all this.
Yeah, that always seems to be a problem, doesn't it?
Hmm. And for that matter, any other countries from putting in a puppet leader. It needs to be whatever they do, it has to be a Palestinian elected leader.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
So
We can't have we can't have the people being represented by people who were not chosen by the people. That'd be a total violation of our entire concept of democracy.
we actually do have that right now. The US refuses to recognize Hamas as leaders, even though they won the election, and says, we're going to deal with the PLO, even though they have no authority in Palestine at all right now.
Right. And that's one of those things where we keep coming back to the argument that the Palestinian Liberation Organization or Hamas or whoever it is that's associated with those currently have real deep ties back to other foreign nations, even in that aspect, because of who's been funding their terror activities for the past several years. Their loyalty is to them, not to the actual Palestinian people.
That's true. But the US still trying to pick and choose who they want to deal with in each situation. Is
Yeah.
what I'm kind of getting at.
We need
It
to
would-
give up that.
Exactly. It would be like if Putin says, you know what, I want to deal with, he would never say this, but I decided to recognize Jimmy Carter as president of America because I like Jimmy Carter and I don't like Joe Biden. So I'm gonna set up a meeting with Jimmy Carter to talk about the state of America and Russia. It would be like that.
I want to do a Futurama thing, and I want to bring back Dwight D. Eisenhower. Bring back Dwight as that. I know they keep bringing back Tricky Dick for Futurama. As one of the talking heads for president of the future. I honestly think we had better presidents that we could go back and do that with as far as the future goes.
Absolutely.
Tricky
But,
was
yeah.
straight as a sellout.
That's what the US does. And imagine how we would react if another country said that. Well, we're not going to deal with your president. We're going to deal with the past president because we like them a lot better. We would be like, well, what?
Well, okay. Here's an interesting situation along those lines. Remember Haiti back in what was it, 1996,
Mhm.
or 1995? It's 1995. Okay. Then President Bill Clinton. Yes, that was Clinton then, right? Yeah. Had just called for the invasion of Haiti. We were going to use military force to go in and rout out the dictator, Papa Doc or Baby Doc. And yeah, guess what? I was in on that. I was ground floor sitting in Cuba waiting to invade Haiti. And the use of military force was put on hold indefinitely because Jimmy Carter had flown into Haiti to negotiate on behalf of the U.S. for the surrender of Baby Doc. So it's not unusual for past presidents to go in and be the moderator, be the peace dealer.
No, I don't have a problem with that. But I think that's great. I think, hey, if this president is someone you're willing to deal with and you want to negotiate, you say, I'll negotiate with Jimmy Carter. Great. We'll let you negotiate with Jimmy Carter. But if you say, hey, Jimmy Carter is the one true president of the U.S. and here's who we will deal with on every single issue, that's kind of what the U.S. is doing to Palestine right now and saying the PLO are the leaders of Palestine, even though they lost the elections, and we will continue to deal with the PLO because we want to deal with the PLO. It's like, really?
Yeah. Yeah, we really need to take a look at doing something different with regards to what's going on there. But the solution, because of the players that are involved, mainly with Biden's administration, I do not see anything reasonable happening in the near future. We need to take a look at what's going on in the parties, in the Republican Party, in the Democrat Party, and decide whether or not either one is actually capable of creating a sustainable solution in the future for the Palestine-Israel conflict. Because as long as we have the current people that we do in Congress and in the executive branch, we will continue to influence this, we will continue to affect it, and we will continue to make it worse.
Absolutely. This is why a lot of people, I was gonna say, this is why I don't think the Democratic president is going to do anything in regards to this. We actually voted, I think it was the U.S. in the UN who voted not to even talk about the issue.
Yeah.
And blocked them from discussing it. Joe Biden does not want to talk about this issue. He wants to ignore it. He wants it to go away. He wants to give Israel the time to recover. And then maybe we can talk about the issue in the UN once Israel has time to recover. But no, we can't talk about it right now.
What does Israel need to recover from?
From all the negative press they're getting right now.
Yeah, well, the problem is they don't stop creating the negative press in order to recover from it.
Which means we'll never talk about the issue.
Exactly.
Now, if we had a different president, someone either, I would say, more libertarian or more lefty, we may get a different solution. If we had like a Bernie Sanders, or if we had a Ron Paul style president, we may get a much different solution than we're getting right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I don't think that the establishment of either party is interested in a real solution. They're only interested. The last president to stand up to Israel was George H.W. Bush when he said, "Yeah, you're not going to expand there, or you know that it was only $3 billion we gave them back then." He's like, "You know that $3 billion we give you? I'll cut that off right now if you expand right there."
Yeah.
Imagine that's the last guy who stood up to Israel.
Right? Okay. I
Anyway,
think we managed to beat this one to death here, Shane. What else we got here, Reef?
yeah, we got some more stories for you guys.
It becomes, what's the solution?
Next. So
Okay,
let's take,
this is an interesting clip from Joe Biden. This came out a couple of days ago. Him and his AG were talking about gun violence in America, in particular, how they wanted to address domestic terrorism. So, Reef, go ahead and give it a run.
I might add, the Second Amendment from the day it was passed limited the type of people who could own a gun and what type of weapon you could own. You couldn't buy a cannon. Those who say the blood of patriots, you know, and all the stuff about how we're going to have to move against the government. Well, the tree of liberty is not water with the blood of patriots. What's happened is that there never been, if you want to think you need to have weapons to take on the government, you need F-15s and maybe some nuclear weapons. The point is that there's always been the ability to rationally limit the type of weapon that can be owned and who can own it.
so no one can actually.
The last
see
time
the
we
video
had
on the
data
screen.
on this issue of who was purchasing guns was more than 20 years ago. 5% of gun dealers, turns out, in the study we did, showed that 90% of illegal guns were found at the crime scenes, sold by 5% of gun dealers. 5% sold 90% of the guns found at crime scenes.
All right, I'm sorry, guys. I know you weren't able to see that video, but it was just Joe Biden talking. Would have put you just. I think they could hear it.
No, it came through on some of them. So, but let's go ahead and talk about this issue. One is we're listening to Joe bumble through a number of key issues that are large parts of huge history. You know, watering the blood of patriots with the tree of, yeah. But when it comes down to it, part of what it is he's got two things going on. First, he's calling on the initial restrictions of who could actually own what back in, you know, following the, you know, the Constitution, yeah, Second Constitutional Convention. You know, one, we have the right to bear arms, and at the time, arms included literally everything. You could buy a cannon back then. Matter of fact, if you had enough money, you could buy a battleship and go out and become a privateer for the United States. You know, which is fun. It's somehow that you're a state-sanctioned pirate, is how that ends up working out as privateers. But then he goes on to say, you know, you're going to need nukes, you're going to need F-15s to take on the U.S. government. Now, the implication is this would be a force for force retribution. If somebody were to gain access to something, he may or may not choose to nuke American citizens on American soil for what he perceives to be treason. So again, it comes back to his issue of blooded tyrants and patriots watering the tree of freedom, or tree of liberty. You know, I should make sure I get that right. So here he's looking at restricting Second Amendment rights, and he's justifying it by reaching back and calling on tyrannical eras in the US. Because when you look at it, back in, let's see, 1776, we wrote the Declaration of Independence. 1778, we did the Articles of Confederation. In 79, because it was 13 years after we did the Constitution of the United States. Okay. Less than a year after the Constitution of the United States was, or less than 3 years after the Constitution of the United States was ratified,
Mhm.
George Washington took federal troops and murdered people in Pennsylvania over what they considered then called the Whiskey Rebellion. Okay. The other thing is during that era, blacks, slaves, were the ones who were not allowed to own guns. And that was sort of a case law situation in a lot of states, particularly the southern states.
Mhm.
So here he is making a call on historical cases of atrocities to justify his current stance on gun control. What do you think, Shane?
I think that he's really grasping at straws on this one. I think whoever wrote him this speech, because I know we both know he didn't write the speech.
Yeah, he probably did not.
Whoever wrote him this speech is deciding, let me look back in history to find some stuff here.
Yeah.
But everyone knows I'm a little bit more moderate on that issue. I'm, pretty left on a lot of issues, but on the issue of gun control, I'm extremely moderate. I don't really care if people have guns. I'm more in favor. Hey, I don't mind. Hey, putting the training course in place. I don't mind any of that, but I really don't care if a person has a gun. That's not really. I'm not. And the idea of bombing people, that's ridiculous. That's kind of all I got on this one.
Oh, absolutely. But this is one of those things. Second Amendment issues are going to continue to be a big issue. Now, what the real issue is behind this speech and what it really comes down to is the issue of domestic terrorism. Now, we're running into a number of problems with regards to the way the current administration and the previous administration looked at domestic terrorism. Trump administration placed a big emphasis on the Antifa, particularly the Antifa that were proposing the Communist Manifesto in the United States of America, more so than some of the other versions of Antifa that have made themselves known in various other parts of the United States. But this comes back to they don't want the disruption in the streets. They don't want the disruption in the communities. And in addition to this, Biden has actually chosen several groups that he considers to be political opponents, to name them as domestic terrorists. Now, that in and of itself is particularly bad, especially considering a number of these organizations have taken oaths of nonviolence for political means. He's had at least one individual come on and, I believe it was his director of the CIA or the FBI, who actually named the Libertarian Party, as domestic terrorists. He couldn't get it on the docket because, there's reasons for that. But when you start realizing that that is thought process that exists within the Biden administration, we begin to sense that there is an extreme departure from rights to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness just because you disagree with the way the United States government is currently functioning.
Now, that draws an interesting line because if you can call the Libertarian Party terrorists, you can call the Green Party terrorists, you can call PSL terrorists, you can call independent voters terrorists, you can call the Constitution Party terrorists, you can just start labeling all of your political opponent parties terrorists in order to get rid of them. That's a very dangerous precedent.
Oh, it is. And honestly, when it comes down to it, despite the fact that he went after the Libertarian Party by name, almost any one of those other organizations is easier to name a terrorist because they have not made oaths to nonviolence or non-aggression in relationship to their political agendas. You take a look at the Party for Socialization and Liberation. You take a look at some of the other organizations. They have not said that violence is off the table. Libertarian Party has.
Right. Now they're going to have to just because they don't want to be labeled as terrorist organizations. Like it's like a thing where they're doing it, which I guess they should have done to begin with, but you shouldn't have to do it out of fear of being called a terrorist organization.
Well, I mean, and honestly, that's one of those things that we sort of overlook when we go in and we say we want to start a political party. Well, the thing is if you're going to use a political party, you have to work within the system that exists. You need to
Yes.
work to change it. You need to fix it. You need to make certain tweaks to it as you go along. Uh, but it's one of those things, just by creation of the party itself, you assume that everybody already understands that you have the intent of working within the system and not creating a violent revolutionary arm that exists outside of the party working towards the same goals. You know,
Mhm.
um, that's where we're at. I think Joe played his hand a little too loosely. He gave too much away within his administration, and as you pointed out, I don't think his speechwriter fully thought through the process, particularly with Biden's current ability, cognitive ability. He's obviously reading this from a script, obviously reading it from a teleprompter, and he still couldn't get it right. Uh, some of these quotes, they're well known, they're historic. Um, you shouldn't be messing them up.
Exactly.
Okay. I think that's
But
good for Biden right now.
definitely. Well, to say, if you can name one political party as a terror, you can name them all, and I think that's a dangerous precedent that we need to get away from.
Absolutely.
I might add, 90% of
So,
Okay, this next story, this one's tragic and it's coming around real quick because the Catholic Church has gotten involved in actually going over their past atrocities and trying to make atonement for them. Unfortunately, it's breaking up old wounds, creating new wounds within community and heritage relationships between the church and indigenous peoples, not just in the US, not just in Canada, but this actually affects globally because these same concepts occurred in Australia with the indigenous people there, the Aborigines, and several other locations where the Catholic Church had gone in as priests and missionaries in order to set up these camps. So, Reef, if you could go ahead and play it now.
This country is still grappling with grief and anger in the wake of the discovery at the Kamloops Residential School. Well, we have breaking news tonight of another terrible finding.
A Saskatchewan First Nation says it has found hundreds of unmarked graves at the site of another former residential school. Marivel Residential School was situated on what is now part of the Cowessess First Nation, east of Regina. It was demolished in 1999 after operating for nearly 100 years. Tonight, the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations says this new discovery will be the most substantial to date in Canada. They'll be holding a virtual news conference tomorrow, along with the chief of the Cowessess First Nation, to share more details.
Okay, so some of the things that we're looking at with regards to what's going on with
This
the
country
indigenous nations is currently we are at, I believe, 1,400 unmarked graves in the 7 sites that have been investigated so far. Now, this represents a fatality rate among the children in these residential schools in Canada and the US of approximately 1 in 20. As actually documented, a number of these graves probably avoided that 1 in 20 documentation and represent significantly higher numbers, particularly because of some of the stories that are coming out regarding what went down, what happened in several of these locations. Now, we step back and we take a look at the number of residential schools that currently exist, in the United States. Let's see. I'm going to have trouble finding it. So right now there are 736 residential schools that did exist at one time. Okay. There are somewhere in the neighborhood of 20 that are still active in some capacity, the land of which has neither been reclaimed by the indigenous people that were housed at the residential school and similar others. But right now, this is only 7, less than 1% of the 736 residential schools in the United States and Canada that have been investigated for unaccounted deaths of the children that were attending those residential schools at the time. And it continues to be a problem. Bureau of Indian Affairs, particularly because of who's controlling it right now. And this was one of the few interesting aspects of the Biden administration in his choice of Department of Interior, because we actually have an indigenous woman who is overseeing the Bureau of Indian Affairs as part of the Department of Interior, who is responsible for conducting the investigation into each and every one of these residential schools in the United States. And with the forensic capability that we currently have to go in and investigate, this is going to get real ugly as far as U.S. and indigenous relations here, while everybody comes to terms with what will be found out over the next 2 years. Shane, how you feeling, man?
I think this is a really interesting story. But I think we really definitely there's definitely a lot of times where we will screw with the Native Americans, and just because we have a Native American heading up the Indian Affairs Bureau does not mean they will come out with a favorable outcome for whatever they're trying to do in this situation. That's extremely identity politicky to think that just because that one is there, that they're going to get the result they want.
Well, to a certain point, I do agree with you on that. Reason why is because she just happens to be the senior on the Department of Interior. And as a secretary position, she does have a significant amount of influence. However, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is an American institution. Okay, let me say that again. It is an American institution with several self-defense mechanisms in place in order to prevent its dissolution because of the things it has done over the past 150 years of its existence. Okay, there are a lot of good people within the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The fact that the Pennsylvania case was actually allowed to continue to be investigated, and I believe that came out with 170 or so unmarked graves in Pennsylvania, is one of the residential schools that was investigated. Does tend to be a good sign that the Bureau of Indian Affairs does intend to investigate this with integrity, though. So we will see as things move forward. And but yeah, it's going to shake an awful lot of the U.S. institutions to their roots. Bureau of Indian Affairs has a long history of atrocities associated with it, some more public than others. Its arrangement with the churches that ran the residential schools for the indigenous Americans is going to become very public, particularly as the tribes start forwarding in Freedom of Information Acts associated with agreements, arrangements. You know, and this will go way back. You know, this is right up there on par with the 1619 Project as far as forensic journalism and investigative journalism. So,
absolutely. Now I know Mark Charles. Everyone he ran for president as an independent.
yes.
He has said that he's really excited to see Deb Haaland there now. That might be a good thing in some ways, but again, I think he's a little bit overly excited about it because he thinks that he had said now there's going to be some, and I'm not going to quote him because I don't know exactly what he said, but the way he talks about it, it seems like he thinks that a lot of the issues are going to be taken care of because she's there. I don't know if that's the case.
Well,
I'm
she is going to meet a lot of resistance. But at the same time, I know an awful lot of people got involved in the Bureau of Indian Affairs because they actually believed in trying to right the injustices. In some senses, good intentions created more problems than they solved, which is the case anytime you depend on the government to fix a problem that really is part of a cultural issue in the local communities. And unfortunately, it was the residential schools that created these cultural issues in the indigenous communities.
absolutely.
You know, perpetuated the cycle of violence, of abuse, And until we can actually allow them the opportunity to heal from what the residential schools have done to their communities, I'm not sure government intervention is the best path forward.
Absolutely. Now, I want to apologize to everybody. We forgot to stream to Facebook today. So sorry to our Facebook viewers. We're not able to see the show today. I'm so sorry, guys.
We will get there. Okay, I think we got that one down, Reef. What else we got today?
So
This
let's go to
country
the
is
next
still
slide. So no, that's not it. Oh, is this Joe Biden talking about it? Let's see.
Joe Biden is a
Oh no. So hang on. So let me go back. So let me explain to everybody. So for those who don't know, I went on to David Pakman's stream as KRTD Media a couple days ago. He did a stream, something about gun control. I wasn't paying attention to anything he was talking about really. But I just went on so I could ask him some questions because he was accepting super chat. So those who don't know, David Pakman about 4 years ago would have been considered a progressive, a strong lefty, but that was 4 years ago. He hasn't moved the needle much in the last 4 years. Now I would call him a Warren. I would call him now would likely be a Warren Democrat, and not even a fighter Warren Democrat, like a Senator Warren, not a Professor Warren who did the CFPB, like a Senator Warren Democrat. Very weak, very soft-spoken, very not important. But anyway, I asked him a couple of
AKA
questions.
A shit lib.
Yes,
One of
that
those.
is the word.
I think that's the word.
Exactly.
Webster's
Yes,
has
thanks,
it.
Reed.
Webster's has it in the thing. You know.
My God, it's Webster's word now already.
Yeah, it's shit lib. You know, it's already up there. At least on the Urban Dictionary. It's definitely at least there.
Okay, Urban Dictionary. Well, Urban Dictionary's got its own.
The king of all knowledge, the Urban Dictionary. You know.
That's Reef, the man behind the curtain who forgot to stream to Facebook.
It says it's unable to connect. So both on Indies
we'll
and
take a look at technical issues
Yeah.
later.
Yeah, we'll have to take a look at
Anyways, so let's take a look at what I asked David Pakman.
it. Here we go.
Joe Biden is a neoliberal corporatist. If you're on the left at all, you would do a lot more criticisms of him. Please hold Joe Biden accountable. My lead story Monday was a criticism of Joe Biden. In the clip today about the Voting Rights Act.
I mean, for one, grammar Nazi already. Really?
Yes.
You're probably on a Nokia chirp sending in your super chat, right? You know, you pulled out your razor, and you had to T9 predict it, right? And it came up your instead of your. Like, what is his? And then on top of that, he criticized Joe Biden on Monday.
Okay.
With what?
That's very nice.
What did he not like the socks he was wearing? Was that what it was? Right.
Let's play back what he said. What did he criticize him on? Let's see what he has to say.
I don't know if he did. Oh, we have that one.
Joe Biden is a neoliberal corporatist. If you're
then this one, right?
KRTD, hold corporate Dems as accountable.
Yeah, we didn't get what he said because he didn't say it. I remember watching the whole video. He didn't say what he
said. Something
Joe
he
Biden
criticized him.
So he's only allowed to criticize them once, not tell you what he criticized you on. You know, just one time he's allowed to criticize. The check writers give him one free don't criticize Biden coin, and he used that last Monday. So
no, I saw the video. I don't remember what it was about, but it was a very tepid criticism.
Yeah.
And it's only the last. I watch him occasionally just to keep up on it. He's only criticized him three times in the last 4 months.
I guarantee you 75% of that video was him apologizing for the thing he just criticized Joe Biden on.
Yeah.
I mean,
so let's take a look at the question I asked him here.
KRTD, hold corporate Dems as accountable as Republicans.
And he just continues to scroll through.
Yeah, he just gave you nothing, which, you know, he's definitely not going to respond to every fangirl in his chat, but, you know, like...
He's getting that. But, okay. So here's another question. I asked him about Julian
how much did you pay for that one super chat that he ignored? I think you need a refund.
$2.
Yeah, get
Yeah.
a refund of $2, like for cereal. Pac-Man, if you're
So-
watching, you can email at KRTD. We'll get that refund sorted out. Anyway,
Okay. So Joe Evans and I went on Action for Assange. I remember, I think it was with Madeline. We talked about
Yes,
Assange and all
we did.
those issues. Now,
Yeah.
here's what happens when I asked David Pakman about Assange.
Why are you afraid to support Assange? I really don't think about Julian Assange.
Really?
I mean, except
Really?
all the time. Says the girl who doesn't have a crush on you. No, I don't really think about Joe. I don't think about him at all. What are you talking about? Every time you see Jimmy Dore's name come up, the things out of your mouth is Julian Assange. Hashtag don't force the vote ever. That's the two which is almost what 25% of Paxman's show at this point is fuck Jimmy.
Exactly. And the thing is, I don't want to criticize David Pakman. I used to like the guy, but the thing is, he did it to himself. If he wanted to not be criticized, he had to keep true to the principles that he started on. And he's just, not that he doesn't keep true to the principles, he's just extremely weak.
Yeah, so
He's not
there's
not doing
a,
what he's supposed to do.
there's a chart somewhere, right, that someone has of how much David Pakman became a shit lib on the left, and how big is the number that they write on his checks, right? Those things on the other, and then you can see the graph just steadily, it's like an exponential growth there, right? He's more willing to shit lib it up, the more Big Seltzer pays him, so.
Mm-hmm. And of course, I wasn't expecting him to talk about force the vote on Medicare for all. I wasn't expecting that.
Well,
But I was also
he
not
had to help
expecting
out-
him to
he had to
say,
help out his girl
I like the
AOC.
public option.
Yeah. It's,
Like, he's
it's,
like, I'm good with that.
This is called moving the goalposts. We're moving the goalposts on fucking Jimmy Dore's force the vote. First it's bad and shit, and then it's maybe we should have done it, and then now it's no, we definitely should have done it because Chuck Schumer's doing it, himself right now, right? Chucky the Schum's forcing the vote, right? And there's reporters right now that are having to go see here's why Chuck Schumer would try to force a vote that wouldn't actually pass anyway, and see what had happened is Chucky's a nice guy, and not like those Jimmy Dore characters. They're nightclub comedians and have said fuck too many times, right? So that's bad. It's standard shit libby nonsense, right? We're just moving the goalposts so that whoever's the most left in the group can't speak because you just keep accepting a little bit of their point, so that but denying everything else, right?
Excellent.
It's we check off the things you can't deny one by one, and then you just keep go. Oh well, okay, yeah, but Russia's still Russia. It's same shit, different tactic. But I think you have one more clip, or was that the
I
last
just want
one?
to say,
In my best Jan voice, Russia, Russia, Russia.
Yeah. Can I see your
Do I have
Rachel
another
Maddow
one?
impression as well?
mhm.
You
Do I have another one here or no? Let's see.
Yeah, let's go ahead and hit the last one.
Why are you afraid to support Assange? I really don't think about Julian Assange.
Yeah. That was,
So
we
I just want
did
to
that
say
one. That was the last
to
one.
David Pakman.
We got one more here.
I don't think we do. I think that's it.
Oh, that
All
was
right,
it.
so I just want to say to David
Last one.
Pakman, if you're watching this, which you're not,
If
You
you're
can-
watching,
I
if you're
will-
watching this, go contact Julian's dad and brother who are in the area, apparently doing shows. They were just on Jimmy Dore, a wonderful. I don't know if anyone has heard of him, but they should definitely check out the interview he did with Julian's dad and brother. Who, how fucked up is that? That guy's got to go around the country, a different country that's trying to extradite his son from a different country as a traitor to the country he's not a part of somehow, right? You know, and
Yeah.
he as a father who is probably in his what? Julian's how old? Like late 30s,
I don't
early
know.
40s.
Julian's dad's got to be older than me. Not by
Yeah.
much, probably.
And he just went on a whole tour from, Fort Lauderdale to DC to, like, I'm sure he's now on East Coast because he was with Jim, or West Coast because he's with Jimmy, right?
Yeah.
So he's now on West Coast shit, right? And I'm sure they're having that home run for Julian event, I think, over there somewhere in California. People should probably look that up. But
So
his dad's
yeah.
got to go around and fucking beg people to not, like, try and murder his son right after who have we seen die?
We've had McAfee. We've had Epstein. Who else?
Epstein before that. Well, I'm sorry. They tragically committed suicide. I should specify.
By allowing somebody else to hang them by the neck until dead.
Yeah, I think Webster is going to change the definition of suicide to killed by the elite, because that's pretty much what it is at this point.
Definitely.
So-
All right. So David,
We're
if you're
going to
watching-
suicide you. That's what we're going to. We are going to suicide you.
Yeah.
Dude.
I think that was actually came across in one of his chats. But yeah, let's go ahead and wrap this up now.
So again, David, if you're watching and you want to defend yourself, I'll glad you have you on. You can contact at KRTD Media, and I will debate you, and I will destroy you.
No,
Anyway.
I'd rather. Can we sanction an MMA event and I'll just fight? We'll make more money than Logan Paul, guaranteed. Right? Or put him with someone. Joe, what do you want to make? Get knocked out? How much money you think get knocked out's worth?
At this point in my life, I'll take $100,000 to get knocked out.
Yeah, $100,000, Pac-Man. If you win, whatever. We'll just your people call our people. We'll get it ironed out.
Oh, and
if I gotta
wanna
fight
take
Jank's more my weight class. I think that's fine.
Oh, that's
we'll
fair.
do it
That's
up.
fair.
I'll put him in headgear. Headgear's fine. It can be exhibition.
Up there,
I'm down.
are we doing the full open hand MMA or?
Do gloves. We'll do Nevada commission
gloves.
rules.
Dude,
Okay.
I want to address the chat for a minute. We have Falcone General saying, "Death to Israel, free Palestine." And then we have KRTD Media, which I assume is Yuri,
Yeah, that's me.
saying, "Death is bad. How about extreme discomfort to Israel and free Palestine?"
Yeah, that works for me. May their pubes be infested with the fleas of 1,000 dogs, and may their arms be too short to scratch.
Okay, I got to do a little pushback on this, Reeve, simply because I'm coming from this new place of love and kindness and all that.
Yeah.
But this
You've been listening to Roger Waters.
Retribution, an eye for an eye makes the whole world blind.
Oh, absolutely.
I think that's one of those things that the U.S. has been particularly problematic with in any of its mediations.
Yep.
Is how eager
we're
we are
throwing
to
rocks
facilitate.
at any person that we think is doing wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And we
I'm
really
with you.
need to get away from this retribution aspect, especially collective retribution, because we've gone after entire nations for stuff that one person did.
Yeah. Like literally one. World War II was one assassination and the whole world erupts in flame.
Right? All over Duke Ferdinand. It's like, who was the dude?
I just thought it was a dope song by that one band, real catchy.
Yeah.
And then I found a history book and it was like, oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
Things happen.
It hits you in the fields entirely different once you realize the history associated with it.
Yeah.
That's one of
what's
the problems.
changed? Nothing.
Yeah. Nothing's changed. We are still doing retribution on a large scale. We are doing collective retribution on a national scale for actions a single individual takes.
We'll wrap with words of a wise man. War. What is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
Say it again.
How about this?
Anyway, what? Yeah.
How about to quote Jesse Ventura, "War is a racket. Read the book."
Yeah.
Yeah, and that Smedley
body.
Butler. who wrote the book by that name before him.
Yeah.
It is absolutely a racket, and it's time that we stop supporting that aspect. It is time for us to stop convincing ourselves that other people are lesser human beings to justify what we do on a national and global scale.
Well,
so
Absolutely.
I'm wanting
peace,
to, peace.
love.
Like and subscribe if you haven't already. Hit that like button.
Like and subscribe, or else
Go
we will
check
declare
out-
war on you now.
Go check out Indie Left News. He's dope. Get a lot of
That's
news from that guy.
That's independentleft.news, and that'll take you to all of his stuff.
Or Indie Left News. Either one works. So
Okay, yeah, or independentleft.gg will take you to the Discord
at
server.
KRTD on all the socials. Go find us on there too. All right,
Absolutely. Everybody, thanks for tuning in today.
Bye-bye.
We'll check out the Facebook for you guys, and everything will be up and running by next week.
Bye-bye.
Maybe. Are we clear?
Yep.